Space was quiet. Too quiet. The alien survey vessel moved slowly through the black emptiness, its sensors active, searching for signs of anything useful. For weeks, the crew had found nothing but dead rocks and broken metal from old wars. The beta captain was close to turning back when the sensors made a strange sound. The technician frowned at his screen. "Captain, I think there's something out there." The captain walked closer. "Something? Be clear." The technician adjusted the controls, eyes wide with disbelief. "It looks like a ship. A very large ship." The crew gathered around the screens. The image appeared, blurry at first, then sharper as the sensors focused. A massive object floated in the middle of the debris field. It was so big that at first they thought it was part of an asteroid. But no, its shape was too precise, too sharp. It was built, not natural. The alien crew stared in silence. None of them had seen anything like it before. Its black surface reflected almost no light. The armor looked thicker than any design in their empire. The ship was enormous, the size of a floating city. One of the younger officers whispered, "What kind of ship is that?" The captain's voice was low. "Not ours. Not from any empire I know. Run a deep scan." The technician's hands shook as he did as ordered. At first, the readings came back empty. No life signs, no power signals, nothing but cold metal. But then, just for a moment, the scanner picked up a faint pulse, like a rhythm. Then it vanished again. The technician blinked. "Sir, I think it's alive." The room filled with nervous laughter. "Alive? Don't be foolish," one officer said. But no one smiled, because deep down, none of them were sure it was a joke. The captain studied the shape carefully. His throat tightened as recognition struck him. The design, the size, the silence, it matched stories told long ago. Stories that most thought were only legends. He whispered one word. "Human." The crew gasped. Everyone had heard the old tales of humans. They were the species that had once shaken the galaxy with their wars, fierce, clever, impossible to defeat. And then one day they had disappeared. Some said they destroyed themselves. Others said they had gone into hiding. But one thing was certain. No one wanted them to return. The captain straightened his back, forcing himself to appear calm. "It is only a story," he said firmly. "Humanity is gone. This is just an empty wreck." But his own words did not comfort him. The alien ship drifted closer, circling the massive battleship. Its black armor stretched for kilometers. Strange, marks covered the hull like scars or ancient symbols. There were no lights, no movement, no sign of crew, but something about it felt awake. One soldier broke the silence. "Captain, maybe we should leave this place." Another officer shook his head. "Are you mad? Do you not see what this is? If we bring this ship back to the Empire, we will be rewarded beyond measure. It could change everything, our weapons, our power, our future." The captain hesitated. The risk was great, but the reward, unimaginable. His empire was always hungry for new technology. A ship like this could make him a hero. Finally, he gave the order. "Prepare a boarding team." The crew shifted uncomfortably, but no one dared argue. Orders were orders. Moments later, a smaller shuttle detached from the survey ship. Inside, the boarding team sat in silence, their armor shining faintly in the dim light. They gripped their weapons tightly, though no one wanted to admit they were afraid. Through the shuttle window, the silent giant grew larger and larger. It looked like a mountain floating in the void, its surface smooth, yet scarred, lifeless, yet threatening. One soldier whispered, "Why does it feel like it's watching us?" The leader snapped, "Quiet, it's just metal." But his own voice shook slightly. The shuttle attached to the hull with a heavy thud. The soldiers activated their cutting tools. Sparks flew as they sliced into the armor. To their surprise, the metal resisted more than anything they had ever cut. It was stronger, older, almost unbreakable. Finally, with effort, they carved a narrow opening. The leader went first. He stepped through the cut and entered the ship. His light shone into the corridor ahead, and the team froze. The interior was not what they expected. The halls were massive, tall enough for giants. The walls were smooth and dark, but they almost seemed to move under the light. No dust, no decay, as if no time had passed. One soldier whispered, "This ship, it's not dead." They moved slowly, their boots echoing faintly on the metal floor. The silence was heavy, pressing on their minds. Each corner felt like it was hiding something. Each shadow looked alive. The leader raised his communicator. "Captain, we are inside. No resistance so far. No signs of crew, but this ship feels strange." Back on the survey ship, the captain's crew listened carefully. They leaned closer to the screens, their faces pale. And then it happened. The boarding team stopped moving. The walls around them began to hum softly. At first, it was quiet, almost like wind. Then it grew louder, a low, deep sound that vibrated through their bodies. The technician on the survey ship gasped. "I'm picking up something. An audio signal." The sound came through the speakers. It was slow, heavy, and rhythmic. The entire crew went cold. It was a heartbeat. The soldiers inside froze. One of them dropped his weapon in fear. The sound echoed through the dark halls, steady and alive. The leader's voice cracked as he whispered, "Captain, this ship, it's not empty." On the survey ship, silence fell. No one spoke. No one moved. All eyes were fixed on the screen, on the black corridors of the human battleship. The heartbeat grew louder. The captain finally realized the truth. This was not just a ship. It was something more, something dangerous, something waiting. And by entering it, they had woken it up. The silence inside the human battleship was heavy, pressing down on the alien soldiers as they moved deeper into the endless corridor, their helmet lights barely cutting through the darkness, every step echoing like a drumbeat in the hollow halls. And though no wind blew, the air inside felt thick, almost alive, as if the ship itself was watching them. The leader of the team raised a hand, signaling his squad to halt, and listened carefully. There it was again, the sound they all dreaded. The slow, steady heartbeat that pulsed through the walls, vibrating under their boots, growing stronger the further they went. One of the younger soldiers whispered nervously, "It's following us!" But the leader snapped back, "Ships do not follow. Keep moving," though even he could not hide the unease in his voice. They passed through a massive chamber, its ceiling so high it vanished into the dark, its walls lined with strange panels, smooth and black, marked with patterns their scanners could not understand, symbols carved deep as if written in pain. Suddenly, the soldier at the back gasped. His weapon flickered and shut down, its energy drained without reason, and when he tried to restart it, nothing happened. "My gun is dead," he cried, panic rising, and another soldier quickly checked his own weapon, only to find it too had lost power. "The ship is taking it," the technician muttered, trembling. "It's drinking our energy." Their leader forced them onward, deeper into the maze, trying to keep control, though inside he felt the same fear twisting in his chest. Then the corridor shifted, or perhaps it only seemed so, but the path behind them was no longer the same. The door they entered through was gone, replaced by more endless walls, and the realization hit them all at once. The ship was moving, not in space but inside itself, changing shape like a living thing, trapping them within. A strange sound rippled through the air, like a whisper of thousands of voices speaking together, too faint to understand, yet filled with anger, sorrow, warning. The soldiers tightened their formation, lights sweeping across the walls, when, suddenly, One beam landed on something that froze them in place. Rows of human armor stood silently in alcoves along the hall, tall and broad, black as the ship itself, each one shaped like a warrior waiting to fight. The armors were empty, motionless, but the way they stood felt unnatural, too perfect, too ready. "Statues," one soldier whispered, though his voice shook. "Just empty statues." But then another swore he saw one of the helmets tilt slightly, as if turning to look at them. Fear rippled through the squad, and though no one wanted to admit it, every one of them felt the same chilling thought. These armors were not dead. They were waiting. The leader's communicator buzzed with static as he tried to report back to the captain, but only fragments of his voice escaped, broken and fading, and the crew back on the survey ship leaned close to the speakers, trying to make sense of the words, hearing only, "But ship, alive, not safe," before the signal cut. On board the battleship, the squad pressed forward, unable to retreat, searching for any sign of control systems, any place to understand the ship. But all they found were more endless halls, more silence, more heartbeat. Then ahead, a door slid open on its own with a hiss, revealing a chamber bathed in faint blue light. And though every instinct told them not to enter, they had no choice. Curiosity, fear, and orders pushed them forward. Inside, they found a massive core, not mechanical, but organic-looking, pulsing slowly like a giant heart, tubes and veins spreading out from it through the walls, glowing faintly as if carrying lifeblood through the ship. The soldiers stared, unable to speak, because in that moment, they understood. The ship was alive, not a machine, but something between flesh and metal, a creation beyond their knowledge, and it knew they were there. The heartbeat grew louder, faster, echoing in their skulls until one soldier screamed, dropping to his knees, clutching his head, shouting, "It's inside me! It's in my mind!" The others tried to pull him up, but he fought them wildly, his eyes wide with terror, and then suddenly he went still, collapsing like a puppet with cut strings. His body lay motionless, but his face was frozen in an expression of pure fear, eyes staring at something only he had seen. The squad stood frozen, horrified, and then the leader barked, "We move! Now!" dragging them out of the chamber, but the moment they stepped back into the corridor, the whispering voices grew louder, forming words at last, harsh and broken, in a language older than theirs, yet somehow clear in meaning. "You should not be here." The soldiers stopped, breath caught in their throats, as the shadows around them deepened, the lights on their helmets flickering one by one. The leader clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stay strong, but inside his heart pounded with the same rhythm as the ship. And back on the survey vessel, the captain and his crew watched their monitors go dark, every signal from the boarding team vanishing in an instant, leaving only one sound across the comms, the slow, heavy heartbeat of the silent ship. The corridor stretched endlessly before the alien squad, their lights flickering weakly as though the ship itself resisted their presence, and though they moved carefully, each step felt heavier, as if invisible eyes followed their every motion, studying, waiting, judging. The leader forced his voice to stay calm as he whispered into his broken communicator, but only static replied, the survey vessel far behind them unable to hear anything except the steady, dreadful heartbeat echoing through the ship's metal bones. One soldier glanced over his shoulder and froze, his breath catching. In the shadows, he swore the rows of human armor they had passed were no longer still, their stances ever so slightly shifted, their helmets tilted as if watching the intruders leave. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, but the feeling remained. The statues were moving, but only when unseen. Fear spread silently through the squad, each member keeping their weapons raised even though the energy inside them was gone, drained away by the ship's unseen hunger. The technician checked his scanner again and cursed. The device showed nothing. No map, no signals, no life. Yet he could feel the weight of something pressing against his mind, like cold fingers brushing his thoughts. They moved deeper, and then the walls changed. The smooth metal rippled faintly, like water disturbed by wind, and for the first time, the soldiers realized the ship was not only alive but aware, its very walls pulsing with faint light, as if veins carried thought and intention. The leader ordered them forward, his voice trembling but firm, for retreat was impossible, the path behind them sealed by shifting corridors. Ahead, lights flickered to life one by one, not from their helmets but from the ship itself, glowing, dimly like eyes opening in the dark, guiding them down a narrow passage. None of them wanted to follow, but the path offered no other choice. As they walked, the whispering voices returned, clearer now, not in any known language, yet somehow understood, 1,000 murmurs overlapping with one meaning. "We see you." The squad stopped in terror, their hearts racing, each one realizing. The ship was not just aware but intelligent, communicating directly through their minds. One soldier cried out, dropping his helmet, his eyes wide with horror, claiming he could see faces in the walls, human faces staring back at him, screaming, without sound. The others dragged him forward, desperate not to be left behind, though each of them now noticed faint outlines in the black metal, impressions of bodies, hands, mouths, pressed into the surface as if the ship itself had swallowed them long ago. The technician's voice cracked as he whispered, "This ship, it's made of them. It's made of humans." His words struck them all like ice, for the rumors of humanity's cruel technology had always spoken of weapons that thought. Ships that killed on their own, machines that acted with human instinct, but none had believed it real until now. Suddenly, the corridor opened into a massive chamber, and the squad stopped at its threshold, their lights sweeping across a space so vast it seemed endless, filled with rows upon rows of pods stretching into the distance. Each pod glowed faintly, and inside each one lay a human form, sleeping, still, waiting. The aliens' breath caught in their throats, thousands of them, preserved perfectly, warriors resting in silence, an army frozen in time. One soldier fell to his knees in despair, whispering, if they wake, we are all finished." The leader forced him up, his voice sharp. "Do not lose control. We are soldiers of the Empire." But even he could not keep his hands from shaking, for the sight was beyond anything he could understand. Then, as if to answer their fear, one pod hissed, its glass cover sliding open with a slow groan, steam escaping like breath from a tomb. The soldiers raised their useless weapons, knowing it would do nothing, their eyes fixed on the figure inside as it began to move. But instead of stepping out, the human form within opened its eyes, glowing faintly with blue fire, and stared directly at them. The squad staggered back, panic rising, as the voices in their heads screamed louder than ever, words pounding into their minds. "You should not have come!" Lights blazed suddenly across the chamber, blinding them, and for a heartbeat they saw not one figure but hundreds of eyes glowing in the darkness, all watching, all awake. The soldiers fled down the nearest corridor, terror overwhelming discipline. But the ship guided them like prey, doors slamming shut behind them, paths opening where it wanted them to go. Back on the survey vessel, the captain and his crew sat, frozen, their screens filled with static, but faint images leaked through, shapes moving, lights flashing, screams echoing. The captain clenched his fists, sweat dripping down his forehead, torn between ordering retreat and pushing further, the promise of power burning against the dread of doom. Then, across the comms, one final image burst through. The face of a soldier screaming as a wall closed around him, swallowing him whole, his cry ending in silence, and then nothing but the heartbeat. The crew stared at their captain, waiting, their fear clear, but he could not speak. because deep down he knew the truth. They had awakened something far beyond their control, and the ship was no derelict. Ruin, no treasure waiting to be claimed. It was watching, it was alive, and it had just begun to open its eyes. The alien squad stumbled through the twisting corridors, their breaths heavy, fear carved into their faces as the glow of human eyes from the chamber still burned in their minds. And though they tried to tell themselves it was only a trick, some illusion of ancient technology, the feeling in their hearts told them otherwise, that they were being watched with a gaze older and stronger than anything they had ever known. The leader tried to steady his soldiers, forcing his voice to remain cold and firm, but even his steps were shaky as the sound of the heartbeat followed them, louder now, matching their racing pulses, echoing not only through the metal walls, but inside their heads, filling their thoughts with dread. Then, without warning, the lights on their helmets flickered and died, leaving them in darkness until the walls themselves began to glow faintly, revealing shapes ahead, tall and broad, lined against the corridors like guards, standing silent in the shadows. The soldiers raised their powerless weapons, every instinct screaming danger, and as the dim glow spread further, they saw what stood before them. Rows of human battle armor, black as the ship's hull, each one towering, with smooth helmets, and sharp edges resting in alcoves as if they were waiting for a command. At first, the soldiers thought they were empty shells, relics of war, but then one of the armors shifted slightly, its head tilting in their direction, and the entire squad froze, not daring to breathe. The leader whispered harshly, "Hold your ground! They are only machines!" Yet even as he spoke, another soldier gasped, pointing out that the armor's positions had changed, their stances more forward now, like hunters closing in. Fear cracked the squad's discipline as one soldier fired his weapon out of instinct, only to have the energy sputter and vanish before the shot could leave the barrel, the weapon drained again by the ship's unseen will, and the armor that he had aimed at seemed to lean closer, as though mocking his helplessness. Panic spread. The soldiers backing away down the corridor, yet wherever they turned, more suits of armor waited in the shadows, lining the walls, the ceiling, even the floors, silent but not lifeless, their presence crushing the squad with the weight of unseen power. The technician muttered desperately, "They're not machines. They're guardians. They're alive." But before anyone could ask what he meant, a deep whisper filled the corridor, the same voice that had spoken before, now clearer, resonating from the armor itself. "You should not be here." The squad froze, their bodies cold with terror as the armor's eyes flickered faintly with light, not bright, but enough to show they were aware, awake, and waiting. One soldier screamed, unable to bear the pressure, and ran ahead, his footsteps echoing wildly. But the moment he reached the end of the hall, the shadows swallowed him whole, and the scream cut off instantly, leaving only silence. The remaining soldiers stood paralyzed, staring at the empty space where their comrade had vanished, no trace left behind, only the echo of his last cry ringing in their ears. The leader forced himself forward, pulling the squad with him, trying to keep them together. But deep down he knew they were only being herded, driven by the ship itself toward something it wanted them to see. As they moved, the armors seemed to follow, never stepping, never moving in sight, but always closer when they turned their heads, a shifting army of silent watchers. And soon the corridor opened into another chamber, vast and dark, the walls covered in strange carvings. Images of war burned into the metal, showing fleets burning under the fire of ships shaped like this one. Alien worlds collapsing under human bombardment, entire empires falling in silence. The soldiers stared in horror at the murals, realizing these were not warnings, but memories, victories recorded by the ship itself, proof of battles that had shaped the galaxy long before their species had risen. One soldier whispered shakily, "We cannot fight this. We cannot win." But the leader silenced him, though he too felt the same despair settling in his bones. Then, from the far side of the chamber, shadows moved again. But these were not armor, not statues. They were shapes like humans, tall and broad, but blurred, ghost-like, flickering as if half-real, their outlines shifting in and out of the darkness. The squad held their breath as the shadows advanced, silent at first, then whispering in voices that did not belong to the living, voices filled with anger, sorrow, and warning. "You woke us," they hissed together, the sound like knives scraping metal. The soldiers stumbled back, weapons useless, hearts racing, as the shadows circled them, their eyes glowing faintly with the same blue fire seen in the pods. One shadow stepped closer, its form stabilizing for a brief second, revealing a human face twisted with fury before vanishing again into mist. The squad could not take it anymore. Two soldiers collapsed, covering their heads, mumbling prayers in their own tongue, while the leader clenched his fists, fighting against the fear threatening to break him. He shouted into the silence, "We come for knowledge, not war!" But the ship itself seemed to laugh, the heartbeat quickening, the shadows pressing closer, and the armors lining the chamber lifted their heads in unison, their glowing eyes opening fully. The technician fell to the ground, sobbing, whispering, "It's awake! The whole ship! It's awake!" And back on the survey vessel, the crew watched their screens flicker with static and strange symbols, human symbols they could not read, flashing like warnings across every monitor, and through the static came only one phrase, repeated again and again in a voice that was not machine but human. "You should not have come." The alien squad stumbled deeper into the human battleship, their steps heavy and weak as if the air itself grew thicker with every corridor they passed. And though fear already ruled their hearts, something greater waited ahead, something that felt alive and ancient, pulling them toward it like prey caught in the current of a river, unable to turn back. The walls began to change, no longer smooth metal but layered with veins of glowing blue light that pulsed like blood through a living body. And the squad realized the ship was not only awake, it was alive, breathing, and they were inside it. The leader forced his voice to remain steady as he whispered for the soldiers to keep moving, but even his words trembled as the sound of the heartbeat grew louder, now echoing in their bones, not from outside, but from within their chests, as though their hearts were no longer their own. The corridor opened into a massive chamber, unlike anything they had seen before, vast and endless, with towering pillars of black steel rising like the ribs of some giant creature, each one pulsing with light and strange symbols they could not read. And in the center hung a sphere of glowing energy, suspended by nothing, rotating slowly with arcs of lightning sparking around it. The technician fell to his knees, whispering, "This is it!" The heart of the ship, and the squad felt it too. The immense power radiating from the sphere, a power that could destroy fleets, crush empires, erase entire civilizations in silence. As they stared in awe and terror, shadows moved along the walls again, those same human shapes, flickering, circling the chamber, whispering with voices sharp as broken glass, and though the words were not in the alien's tongue, the meaning was clear. They were intruders, trespassers in a tomb that was never meant to be opened. The leader tried to hold his ground, raising his useless weapon, shouting into the void, "We come only to learn!" But the ship's heartbeat thundered louder, drowning his voice. And suddenly the glowing sphere pulsed violently, sending waves of light across the chamber, knocking the soldiers to the ground as their suits crackled with static, their visors filled with images not their own. They saw flashes of ancient wars, fleets burning, worlds collapsing under human fire, voices crying out in terror before being silenced, and above it all, the silent faces of human warriors inside armor like gods, their eyes glowing with fire as they marched without mercy. The visions overwhelmed them, their minds breaking under the weight of human memory, until the leader roared in defiance, tearing his helmet off to clear his head, his breath ragged and desperate. He looked at the sphere and saw, for just a moment, A human face inside the light, staring back at him with cold fury, lips moving though no sound came, and he knew this was no machine, but a soul, trapped, waiting, guarding. The technician crawled forward, his voice trembling as he begged the others to leave, to escape while they still could, but the chamber sealed itself, massive steel walls slamming shut with a boom that shook the ship, locking them inside with the heart of the beast. The soldiers screamed, slamming their fists against the walls, but the shadows pressed closer, their glowing eyes watching, their whispers now sharp enough to cut into the soldiers' minds, and one by one they began to break, dropping their weapons, clutching their heads as visions consumed them. One soldier collapsed, twitching violently as he saw himself burning in fire that was not real. Another screamed as he saw his own planet crumble beneath human bombardment, and the leader, though stronger than the rest, could not hold back the chill crawling up his spine as the human shadows began to form more clearly, their shapes solidifying into armored figures that stepped out of the mist with the slow, deliberate movements of executioners. The leader shouted again, this time not with courage but with desperation. "What do you want from us?" And for the first time the shadows answered in unison, their voices booming, shaking the chamber. "To remember." The soldiers froze, not understanding, but then the sphere pulsed again, flooding the chamber with a wave of images, showing humans in their final battle, outnumbered, outgunned, yet unbroken, fighting until their last breath, choosing to entomb themselves in the ship rather than surrender, binding their souls to the vessel so that no enemy could ever claim it. The aliens realized in horror that they had awakened not a weapon, but an army of ghosts, warriors who had never died, who would never rest, bound forever to defend their ship from anyone who dared to enter. The technician wept, his body shaking, as he whispered, "We cannot leave. It will not let us." And he was right, for the shadows were closing in, the armored figures now fully real, their glowing eyes locked on the squad, their weapons raised. The leader made one final stand, gripping his useless rifle like a club, roaring defiantly as the human warriors surrounded them, and in that instant, before the strike fell, the sphere pulsed one last time, and a voice filled the chamber, deeper than all the rest. A voice that was both human and machine. "You are not worthy." The chamber shook violently, the floor splitting beneath their feet, light flooding every crack as the ship's heart roared awake, and the aliens knew their fate was sealed. The chamber grew darker even as the glowing heart pulsed with blinding light, and the alien squad felt the air tighten around them as if invisible hands pressed against their throats. And in that silence came the sound of footsteps, slow and heavy, echoing across the vast hall, though no living creature should have been able to walk there. The shadows thickened, twisting into solid shapes, armored figures taller than any alien, their bodies clad in ancient human war armor that gleamed with ghostly fire, and though their faces were hidden behind helmets, their glowing eyes burned with fury and purpose. The squad tried to back away, but the chamber walls shifted, forming a perfect circle around them, trapping them like prey in an arena where escape was never meant to exist. The leader forced himself to stand firm, raising his weapon though he knew it was useless, for bullets or plasma could not hurt what was already dead. And still he shouted for his squad to hold together, his voice breaking under the weight of his own fear. The first of the armored humans stepped forward, dragging a massive blade that left sparks on the floor, though it was made of no metal the aliens could recognize, and the sound of its scrape carried the weight of judgment, like the toll of a funeral bell. The technician whimpered, covering his ears as voices filled the chamber again, thousands of them layered atop one another, whispering in a tongue that felt carved into the very bones of the listeners. Voices that carried the rage of soldiers who had refused to die. One alien panicked and fired his rifle, beams of energy tearing into the nearest ghost warrior, but the shot passed straight through the figure, scattering into harmless sparks before vanishing, and the armored human turned its burning gaze upon him, lifting its blade and swinging in one silent motion, cutting through not flesh, but soul, and the alien soldier collapsed screaming, his body convulsing as though ripped apart by unseen claws, his eyes wide and lifeless even before he hit the floor. The squad cried out, dragging him back, but there was no blood, no wound, only the hollow shell of a body emptied of life, as though the ghost had severed something deeper than flesh. Panic spread fast, another soldier dropping his weapon and running toward the sealed wall, pounding on it with bare fists, begging to be let out. But the wall rippled like water and swallowed him whole, leaving nothing but silence. The leader roared at his squad to fight, to resist, but his voice trembled now, his courage burning out in the cold fire of human wrath, and the ghost army closed in, their circle tightening, their blades and rifles raised with the discipline of soldiers who had fought 1,000 wars and refused to forget even in death. The aliens tried everything, grenades, plasma charges, even desperate hand-to-hand strikes, but each attack passed through the figures like smoke, while the ghost weapons struck back with deadly precision, stealing breath and soul with every swing. And the squad dwindled one by one, each soldier falling in agony, their screams echoing until silenced by the crushing power of silence itself. The technician fell to his knees, tears blinding his vision as he begged the ship, begged the humans, begged anyone to spare them, promising never to return. But the ghost army only watched him, their burning eyes cold and merciless. And then they spoke again in a single voice that thundered like an army marching across the stars. "You are not soldiers. You are thieves." The leader, trembling but unbroken, shouted back, "Then test us as soldiers. If you want war, we will fight." His words echoed, bold yet hollow, and for a moment the ghost warriors paused, their heads tilting as though considering his challenge, and then, in unison, they slammed their weapons into the floor, the sound booming like thunder, shaking the chamber as the glowing heart flared brighter, and the aliens were pulled into visions once more. They saw themselves standing on battlefields of fire, surrounded by endless human warriors, their faces stern and unyielding, their weapons shining with the fury of survival, and in those visions the aliens fought, were crushed, fought again, and were crushed again, every defeat burning their souls until hope became dust. The leader screamed, refusing to bow, swinging his useless weapon in rage against the nearest figure, but the ghost caught it with one hand, twisting it into fragments, before pushing him back with a force that felt like a mountain collapsing. His squad lay broken around him, some dead, some catatonic, their minds shattered by the visions. And still the ghost army advanced, endless and unrelenting, until the leader realized the truth. The ship was testing them not for strength, but for worthiness. And they had already failed. He fell to his knees, chest heaving, and spat the only words he had left. "Why us? Why now?" The answer came in a whisper colder than space itself, spoken by every ghost at once. "Because you dared." The chamber darkened again, the glowing heart pulsing faster, and the ghost army raised their weapons high, preparing to strike the final blow, when suddenly the entire ship shook with a sound deeper than anything they had yet heard. A voice. From the heart itself, louder, older, filled with endless rage and sorrow, speaking for the first time not to threaten but to declare, "Enough." The ghosts froze in place, their blades held in mid-air, their glowing eyes turning toward the sphere at the center, and the alien survivors realized in horror that the army was not in control, that the heart itself commanded them, and that whatever judgment awaited was only beginning. The word hung in the air like thunder. "Enough!" And the ghost army froze where they stood, their blades held inches above the cowering aliens, their glowing eyes fixed on the great pulsing sphere at the chamber's heart. And the silence. That followed felt heavier than the battle itself, pressing down on every chest until breath came only in short gasps. The survivors stared wide-eyed, trembling, afraid to move, afraid even to blink, for they felt that the judgment of the ship was not finished but only paused, waiting to reveal its true purpose. Slowly, the pulsing light grew brighter. No longer. Wild and chaotic, but steady, controlled, like a heartbeat echoing across the chamber walls, and in that rhythm came a voice, deeper than the ocean, older than any empire, filled with the weight of endless war and endless loss. You enter what is not yours. You awaken what you cannot command. And you think yourselves masters. The aliens collapsed under the sound, their bodies convulsing as the voice pierced straight into their minds, pulling apart thoughts, memories, secrets, exposing them like glass shards under burning light. They tried to resist, to hide, but the voice laughed, not with joy, but with bitter rage. You steal, you invade, you mock the blood that paid for this steel. You are not soldiers, you are scavengers. The ghost warriors lowered their weapons, slowly, stepping back into the shadows like soldiers dismissed by their commander. Yet their burning eyes remained fixed on the aliens, ready to return in a heartbeat if the heart commanded. The leader, broken but not yet silenced, forced himself upright on shaking legs, his voice a hoarse whisper. "We came to learn. We came to see." But the heart cut him off with a roar that shook the chamber to its core. "You came to desecrate." Visions exploded again, not the endless battles this time, but memories of humans themselves. Armies boarding this ship with banners torn, soldiers bleeding but unbroken, men and women standing side by side in ranks, their faces grim as they prepared for their final fight. The aliens saw planets burning, cities shattered, skies filled with fire as humanity was hunted by empires that once thought them weak. And through it all, these same soldiers held the line, protecting their people, fighting until they had more flesh to give until their very souls fused with the machine to keep it alive. "This is their tomb," the voice thundered, "and you dare to spit upon it with greedy hands." The technician screamed, clutching his head, begging the voice to stop, tears streaming down his face as visions poured into him, showing him the last breaths of soldiers, the screams of children on burning colonies, the fury of captains who swore vengeance with their dying breaths. The leader, struggling to keep his mind intact, shouted into the storm, "If this is a tomb, then why? Keep it alive? Why let it linger in the dark?" The voice fell silent for a moment, and the light dimmed as if considering his defiance, before replying with quiet sorrow, "Because they are not gone. Because the galaxy must remember." And with those words, the ghosts stepped forward again, this time not attacking, but surrounding the survivors, circling them like judges at a trial, their weapons lowered yet their presence suffocating. One ghost, taller than the rest, stepped ahead, lifting its blade and placing the tip against the floor between the leader's feet, and when it spoke, its voice was the same as the heart, yet carried a sharper edge, the voice of a soldier, not a god. "You stand accused of trespass. You stand accused of theft. You stand accused of cowardice. Speak your defense if you have one." The survivors froze, their eyes darting to their leader, waiting for words, any words that might save them from this trial. But his throat was dry, his courage torn to shreds, and all he could manage was, "We did not know. We could not know." The ghost tilted its head, flames flickering in its helmet eyes, and the voice answered, "Ignorance is no shield. You knew it was human. That was enough." The leader tried again, forcing strength into his voice. "If you destroy us, what do you gain? Nothing. You prove only that humanity is as cruel as every empire it hated." The chamber trembled at his words, the light flaring violently, and the ghost's eyes burned brighter, their hands tightening on their weapons. But before they struck, the heart spoke again, colder, sharper, like the edge of a blade cutting through all lies. "We do not need to prove cruelty. We proved survival. The galaxy forgot what we endured. The galaxy forgot the price of peace. But you will not forget. Suddenly, the chamber walls dissolved into light, and the aliens found themselves standing in the middle of a battlefield. Not illusion, but reality crafted from memory. The sky raining fire, human dreadnoughts locked in combat against fleets larger than worlds, every blast shaking the stars. Around them, the ground shook as human soldiers fought in trenches, their cries raw with fury, their eyes burning with purpose, and the aliens could feel every emotion as if it were their own: fear, rage, hope, and the unbreakable will to live. The leader collapsed to his knees, screaming at the vision to stop, but the heart pressed harder, dragging them deeper, showing every wound, every sacrifice, until their souls quivered under the weight of it. "This is judgment," the voice declared. "Not death, not yet. You will carry this memory, branded into your minds. So when you return to your masters, when you whisper in their ears of what you saw, they will know. Humanity waits. Humanity remembers. And humanity will never forgive." The ghosts raised, their blades high, not to strike, but to sear the truth into the very bones of the survivors, and a blinding light engulfed them, hotter than any star, tearing screams from their throats as their minds were burned with visions they could never escape. When the light faded, the battlefield was gone, the chamber restored, the ghosts vanished into the walls, and the survivors lay trembling on the floor, their eyes wide, their bodies weak, their minds broken, but alive. The heart pulsed one final time and spoke in a whisper that echoed like thunder. "Leave. Tell them. Judgment has begun." And with that, the walls of the chamber split open, revealing a path of darkness back to their ship, though every step forward felt heavier, as if the ghosts themselves were following. The survivors staggered back toward their shuttle in silence, their footsteps echoing in the hollow corridors of the human ship, every sound like a whisper of mockery from the walls that still pulsed faintly with light. And though the ghosts were no longer visible, each alien felt their burning eyes watching from the shadows, pressing down on them with unbearable weight. No one spoke, not even the leader, for their throats were dry and their minds screamed with the visions burned into them, visions that would never fade, visions of humanity's endless struggle, of blood that soaked entire galaxies, of vows carved into steel and soul. By the time they reached their vessel, their bodies trembled so badly that it was difficult to climb aboard, and the pilot, who had stayed behind trembling in fear, looked upon them with horror. For their eyes seemed not their own anymore, hollow, yet burning with an unnatural glow. When the hatch closed, the leader collapsed into the chair, sweat pouring down his face, and in a broken whisper he commanded, "Take us out, now." The engines roared weakly, the ship lifting away from the silent giant, but as they moved back into the void, the human vessel did not follow, did not fire, did not stop them. It only floated in silence, the great sphere at its core, pulsing like a heart that had given its warning. The crew dared not look back for long, but when they did, they swore they saw shadows pressing against the windows, faces of soldiers staring out with fury, and the sight alone nearly drove them mad. As they entered hyperspace, the memories did not fade. Instead, they grew stronger, pounding in their skulls, every heartbeat echoing the ghostly rhythm of the human ship. The technician screamed suddenly, clawing at his skin as if to tear away what was inside him, shouting that the soldiers were whispering in his ear, commanding him to march, to fight, to die. The others restrained him, but his cries never stopped, and soon they all began to hear it too. Faint voices calling in unison, a chant of vengeance, a chant of survival, words they could not understand, yet felt deep in their bones. Days passed, in madness, sleep impossible, food tasteless, every shadow alive with human eyes, every silence broken by the faint thrum of war drums that only they could hear. The leader, once proud, now sat hunched in the captain's chair, his hands shaking, his face pale, whispering to himself over and over, "Judgment has begun. Judgment has begun." They tried to contact their empire, but the words came out twisted, filled with human echoes, as if the ghosts themselves spoke through their mouths, and the communications officer sobbed when his own voice suddenly shifted, becoming that of a human soldier screaming battle cries into the void. When they finally reached their home system, their ship drifted like a coffin, their faces pale, their eyes bloodshot, their bodies weak. But when their empire's fleet hailed them, demanding reports, the survivors only laughed, a broken, hollow laugh that chilled every ear listening. They were brought aboard, examined, questioned, but no physician could explain the strange burns across their skin that pulsed like scars of fire, nor the endless visions that plagued them. The leader was dragged before the council, his body trembling, and when he tried to speak, his words were not his own, his mouth shaping syllables of a language no alien present understood. Yet the sound alone filled the chamber with fear, for the tone was one of soldiers swearing vengeance. Finally, he collapsed to the floor, whispering in his own tongue again, "They are coming. Humanity waits, and you will all pay." Panic spread across the empire as whispers grew. The story of the silent ship carried through officers, then soldiers, then citizens, and though many dismissed it as madness, others felt the weight of truth in their bones. In the nights that followed, strange dreams spread like a plague, soldiers and civilians alike waking in terror after seeing human armies marching through fire, ships blotting out the stars, ghostly eyes burning into their souls. Some believed the survivors had carried back a curse. Others swore humanity itself had reached into their minds, planting warnings across the empire like seeds. The technician who had clawed at his skin was found dead, his body stiff, his mouth frozen in a scream, and on the walls of his quarters were markings no alien hand could have made, symbols of human military ranks and words written in blood that no one understood. The council grew desperate, arguing if the tale was real or madness, if the silent ship was only a relic or the beginning of something far worse, but none dared to return, none dared to test if the ghostly army waited. Still, the leader, now broken beyond repair, sat chained in a dark cell, rocking back and forth, muttering endlessly about drums, about soldiers who never rest, about eyes in the dark, and his final words before silence took him were whispered with chilling certainty. They do not forgive, they do not forget, and they are not finished. In the void, far beyond the Empire's reach, the human ship drifted still, silent yet alive, its heart beating faintly, its ghosts watching, waiting, for the memory of humanity was no longer hidden. It was spreading, carried like fire through the minds of those foolish enough to disturb it, and now the galaxy itself began to tremble, for a truth had been revealed. The dead were not silent, the fallen were not forgotten, and the judgment of humanity had only begun. The Empire thought it could bury the story, but fear is a disease that spreads faster than fire, and soon every world whispered about the cursed ship, the silent human battleship that had broken the minds of the crew. And though the council tried to silence the survivors, it was too late, for nightmares had already escaped into the minds of countless beings across the stars. Soldiers woke screaming in the night, shouting words in a human tongue they could not understand, yet each word carried the weight of command, and when they tried to explain, their voices trembled with shame, for they swore they had stood in endless fields of fire, human soldiers marching beside them, eyes burning like suns. On civilian worlds, children cried in their sleep, drawing shapes of human warships with trembling hands, their parents too afraid to admit they too saw the same ships in their dreams. Priests spoke of judgment, claiming the humans were not gone, only waiting, and that their dead had found a way to walk through shadows and memory. The council dismissed this as hysteria. Yet in secret, even the highest lords could not sleep, their chambers filled with whispers, the sound of drums echoing in their skulls until blood trickled from their ears. On the capital world, statues. Cracked, walls shivered, and entire power grids failed without reason. And when engineers investigated, they found strange marks burned into the metal, marks resembling human insignias, symbols that no one had seen before but all instinctively feared. Fleets sent to patrol the borders returned half-mad, captains swearing they had seen shadows moving through the stars, ships that flickered in and out of existence, their scanners showing nothing but their hearts knowing the truth. Commanders gave orders, but discipline crumbled, for soldiers whispered among themselves, afraid to speak aloud, afraid the humans were already listening. Entire colonies refused to send resources to the Empire, claiming they needed to build defenses against the coming, though none could explain what exactly they feared, only that something moved closer each night. The plague of fear grew worse when reports surfaced of voices heard on military frequencies, signals that carried no origin, yet spoke in sharp, cold tones that matched the human ghosts, battle orders, war cries, promises of vengeance. At first, officers thought it was sabotage, but soon the voices were heard everywhere, even in personal comms, even in dreams, and some soldiers simply dropped their weapons and walked into the void, claiming they were answering the call. Empire scientists tried to study the survivors again, but most were already dead, their bodies failing as if drained by unseen hands, their blood boiling with whispers no machine could record. Only one remained, the leader who had first spoken of judgment, and when they forced him into interrogation, he opened his mouth, but his voice was no longer his own. Instead, it was the sound of thousands of soldiers shouting in unison, a roar that shattered the walls and made hardened guards collapse in terror. After that, they killed him. But even in death, his face twisted into a smile, as if humanity itself mocked them from beyond. Rebellion rose on the outer worlds, not against the Empire, but against the fear, as people burned entire fleets in sacrifice, begging the ghosts of humanity to spare them. Others built shrines to the silent ship, leaving offerings of weapons and blood, convinced that only worship could delay destruction. The council fell into chaos, arguments tearing them apart, some demanding every record of humanity be destroyed, others demanding the Empire prepare for war against a force that might already be unstoppable. No answer satisfied the fear, for the fear was not logical. It was alive, spreading like an infection, a curse seated in every dream, every whisper, every star. Soon even the Emperor himself was seen trembling in his throne, his eyes hollow, his voice weak, as he confessed to his closest guards that he too heard the drums, that he too saw the soldiers standing in the corners of his chamber, never blinking, never leaving. Armies tried to rally, ships prepared for defense, but discipline faltered, and more than once entire crews vanished, their ships drifting empty, only a single message carved into the steel in letters of fire. We remember. Panic consumed the galaxy, and still the silent ship floated far away, doing nothing, saying nothing, yet its presence grew in every mind, its shadow stretched across worlds, until the Empire itself seemed ready to collapse under a war that had not even begun. And still, in the dark of night, in every corner of the galaxy, the whispers grew louder, the drums beat harder, and the faces of human soldiers became clearer, as if the dead were not waiting anymore. They were already here. The galaxy held its breath as silence pressed harder than ever before, for the Empire was no longer an empire but a shadow of itself. Its fleets broken by madness, its leaders driven into fear, its worlds whispering the same name over and over, humanity. Still the battleship floated in the void, silent, lifeless, a monument to something greater than war, yet every being who looked upon it felt the weight of something vast and unseen. At first it was only dreams and whispers, then came the drums, but now the fear was no longer only inside their minds. It was shaping reality, changing machines, twisting signals, warping light itself around the cursed ship. On the capital world, when night fell, it did not rise again. The stars vanished, replaced by endless darkness, and in that darkness figures moved, tall and sharp, human soldiers with eyes like suns, their armor glowing faintly with the light of dead stars. No weapon fired at them worked, no wall held them back, for they were not bodies of flesh but echoes of vengeance, memories given power by rage and sorrow. Across the galaxy, similar visions appeared, colonies waking to see human, fleets above their skies, ships that flickered like ghosts yet cast shadows across the ground, shadows that stretched for miles. Some worlds screamed, others prayed, but none dared resist, for the presence of humanity felt like judgment itself, and those who tried to fight were erased without sound, as if they had never existed at all. The council begged for answers, begged for peace, yet every message sent to the battleship returned the same phrase carved into metal or burned into stone. "We remember." And with those words came more, messages across thousands of worlds, not written by machines but carved by invisible hands, always the same, always simple. We wait. We watch. We rise. The Empire's scientists, desperate, gathered what was left of their courage and attempted to approach the silent ship once more, this time sending machines instead of crews, but each machine shut down the moment it touched. The ship's shadow, its memory wiped, its shell burned with human insignia. At last, the Emperor himself, broken and trembling, declared that the Empire would surrender, not to another living empire, but to the dead. And so he ordered statues built, shrines raised, a surrender to ghosts. But the humans did not answer. The ship remained silent, and that silence was worse than any war, for it told the galaxy that judgment was not finished. Then, one night, the silence ended. A light burst from the battleship, brighter than any star, spreading across systems in a wave that no shield could block, no ship could escape, and for a moment the entire galaxy froze, unable to move, unable to breathe. In that light, every being saw the same vision, a battlefield stretching forever, burning skies, endless fire, and humans walking among the flames, not broken, not gone, but strong, their eyes locked on the stars as if daring anyone to challenge them again. The vision burned into every mind, and when it faded, the light vanished, and the battleship was gone. No trace remained, not a single piece of steel, only empty space where it had once floated. The Empire collapsed within days, not because of invasion, but because its people refused to follow leaders who could not protect them from fear itself. New factions rose, some swearing loyalty to the memory of humanity, others fleeing into the unknown to hide. The galaxy became fractured, broken, reshaped by the weight of a war that never truly happened. And yet, in the darkness of space, rumors spread of sightings. Fleets swore they had seen shadows moving. Colonies whispered of voices giving orders in human tongue. Children drew ships they had never seen, and priests claimed the humans had not returned, because they had never truly left. The last message recorded, found burned into the ruins of the council chamber after it collapsed, was simple, written in letters of fire across the walls. "We are awake.